this is Dazzling One, and this week I will be covering syncretic holidays as well as how our days of the week and months' names derive from pagan deities. So growing up, I accepted, like most people, that bunnies and eggs went together, that a Christmas tree and reindeer somehow had something to do with the birth of Christ, and that presents were a part of every major holiday. As I grew older, I realized that it didn't really add up, but it was capitalism, or commercialism for that matter, and major corporations profited off of us, and we had a chance to enjoy time with our family and friends. And even if the days of the week and the months were named after pagan deities, after all, it was mythology, even if it was considered outdated. But as I dug deeper and deeper and I truly saw the origins of this, I distanced myself from it, and I'm proud to say that it's been over a year since I've observed any of the major holidays on the Gregorian calendar. Calendars play an important role. It helps us keep track of time. People use the luminaries, being the sun, constellations, when the leaves would sprout on a particular tree, to describing a harvest season, to keep track of time, as well as the 4 phases of the moon, which were roughly 7 days in length each. Even with the days of the week, different cultures had different ideals of how long a certain week was. We have, as of today in the Western world, 7 days of week, and the Hebrews and the Babylonians were the first to have that length of time for a week. And in other cultures, say in Africa, in tribes, the week may have been 4 days long, whereas in the Incan civilization, it was a 10-day week. Or in China, it was a 5-day week, with sets of working patterns for the Confucian civil service. In Rome, they had an 8-day week period, and the 8th day was for shopping. There was no specific names given to these days of the week. They didn't have it until much later. So, our weeks have pagan names, and the root of this is, in ancient Mesopotamia, astrologers assigned each day the name of a god. The Greeks later called these days days of the gods. In a culture where days were consumed by religion, it's only natural that the days of the week were made in homage to the gods, thought to rule the lives of the mortals. The days of the week follow the same trend as the months of the year, many of which, including January and March, are named after gods from several different pantheons. Monday, which was named for the moon, it could be translated as Moon's Day. Tuesday is first to be named after a god. It was named for Tiahu or Tiwa, a lesser-known god of war and the sky from the English-Germanic pantheon. He is also associated with the Norse god Tyr, who was a defender god in Viking mythology. However, Tuesday does not translate the same in other languages. In Latin, it's Dies Martis, or Day of Mars. And in ancient Greek, it's Hemera Aries, or Day of Ares. Both Mars and Ares were gods of war, like Tyr. Wednesday can be translated as Woden's Day. Woden is associated with the Norse god Odin, and was the chief god and leader of the Wild Hunt. In Anglo-Saxon mythology, directly translated, Woden means violently insane headship, and does not put one in mind of the best of gods. Unlike the other days of the week, the gods named in the Latin and Greek days of the week, Mercury and Hermes, are not associated with violent leadership, but with travel, commerce, and theft. Both are messenger gods. Thursday is one of the easiest days to translate, meaning Thor's Day, named for the Norse god of thunder and lightning. Thursday is also associated with Jupiter in Latin, Dies Jovis, and Zeus in Greek, Hemerodios. All 3 gods are known for their storm-creating abilities, but while the English language took Thor as a god for Thursday, Spanish and French adopted Jupiter instead. Friday is associated with Freya, the Norse goddess of love, marriages, and fertility. The Latin Dies Vernis and the Greek Hermes Aphrodite call upon the goddesses Venus and Aphrodite instead. The latter 2 goddesses are also patrons of love and beauty, and all 3 goddesses are called upon in womanly matters like fertility and childbirth. Following the trend, the other days, Spanish and French adopted Venus for Friday rather than Freya. Saturday in English derives from Saturn's Day, which was taken from the Latin Dies Saturni. Saturn was a Roman god and over different periods of time associated with wealth, plenty, and time. The day in Spanish and French, Sábado, and Samedi, respectively, was named simply as it is in the Jewish Sabbath. Sabbato deriving from the Latin sabbatum, meaning Sabbath, and Samedi deriving from the Old French samedi, which in turn comes from Latin, meaning day of the Sabbath. Sunday is sun's day, translated in both Latin, dies solis, and Greek, hemera helio, as day of the sun, the Christian Jewish god. Before the Gregorian calendar, there was the Julian calendar. And when Rome arose as a world power, they struggled to have a calendar. They were very superstitious about numbers and wanted to ensure that a month had between 29 and 31 days in it, with February being the exception of only 28 days. Julius Caesar went to an astronomer who had been learned in Alexandria by the name of Sosigenes, and in 46 BC, 90 days were added to the year of the new calendar on the 1st of January of 45, which many called it the year of confusion. The switch was gradual, and after a long period of time, the popularity of the 8th day, as I mentioned earlier in the week, dwindled. The Gregorian calendar preceded it. By the 6th century, the seemingly minor error in the Julian calendar, estimating the solar year to be 11 minutes and 14 seconds shorter than it actually was, had accumulated to a 10-day discrepancy between the calendar and reality. It is most noticeable on occasions such as the equinox, now occurring 10 days earlier than the correct calendar dates of March 21st and September 23rd. So, Pope Gregory XIII employed a German Jesuit and astronomer, Christopher Clavius, to find a solution, calculating that the error amounts to 3 days and 400 years. Clavius suggested an ingenious adjustment. Pope Gregory wanted to change it because, in reference to the video I uploaded nearly 6 months ago on the Jesuits and the relation to the beast system, I find it very interesting. We're coming back to the topic of the Gregorian calendar and how by changing the calendar they changed times, which led to a lot of these syncretic holidays. In Daniel 7:25, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of times. But the idea behind this is that there is, in some way, an antichrist system in place, and we've been living in it for longer than people think. It's not just something apocalyptic. The correction was to correct an error in the Julian calendar, and by suppressing 10 days, which now made dates like October 5th to be called October 15th, and providing the only centenary years divisible by 400 to be leap years, and it was adopted by Great Britain and the American colonies in 1752. And now I want to talk about the modern pagan wheel of the year and its 8 parts, because it goes into discussing how these holidays are syncretic. So the first is Yule. It starts on December 21st, and there is the winter solstice between December 20th and the 23rd. It varies according to the particular date on the standard calendar according to when the solstice will occur astronomically. The longest night of the year, the turning point when the days shall afterwards grow longer as winter begins its passage into the coming spring. It is in that worship the goddess, and the time is believed to be when she gives forth again the birth of a divine son child, who shall be both child and eventually lover and father of the next child in the cycle. The winter solstice for pagans is a time of feasting and the exchanging of gifts, and is the original holiday that has been modified as Christmas, and I'll talk about that later. Imbolc on February 2nd is not common to all pagans. This is more popular with Wiccans and various Celtic sects. Bridget is the Celtic goddess of fire and inspiration, and poetry, smithcraft, and healing, as well as yet another representation of fertility and femininity and love. Bridget had such strong following among the Celtics that the Christian church decided it was easier to assimilate her into their own system, and there came about the making of Saint Bridget and all the stories they created about her so that their followers could leave their old beliefs enough so they would not side with the Druids. Ostara, which takes place on March 21st, and it's around the spring equinox on between March 20th and 23rd. It's dependent on an actual astronomical event. It's considered the time when the goddess blankets the earth with fertility, as God stretches and grows to maturity. The hours of day and night are equal, and light is overtaking darkness. This is a time of beginning action and planning and spells and tending to gardens for pagans, and it's the start of the pagan year of spring. Then there is Beltane on May 1st. It's also the same day that the Illuminati was founded, allegedly. And May Eve, which is also part of this, between April 30th and May 1st. So this is most important to pagans to say for Samhain. It's considered a great fertility rite of life, and it starts on the dusk of the 30th of April and continues until the dawn of the 1st. And it's considered the union of the god and goddess to conceive the sun child to be taken place upon the holiday. Then there is Letha, which is on June 21st. It is midsummer, or the summer solstice, between June 20th and the 23rd. It is held as the longest day of the year. The solstice is the celebration of light's triumph over darkness and the thought of bountiful beauty that light brings into life. And then Lugnasad on August 1st is known as the Great Corn Ritual of Wiccan belief. In Celtic realms, this is the celebration of the wheat god. This is the big celebration of the harvest. It's sort of like a pagan Thanksgiving, but the time clock is different as it is that of the Celtics, and it's a time of feasting and dancing. Then there is Maybone, which is on September 21st, and the fall equinox is where it falls between the 20th of September and the 23rd. It's a lesser holiday. It's not widely celebrated by pagans, and mainly it has to do with Weaver's Festival. Braiding of cords are done in the process of casting a spell to add to one's life. Then there is Samhain on October 31st, and this is when many Wiccans will say farewell to the god, even though he's supposed to be reborn during Yule. And this is their grand Sabbath, also known as the Feast of the Dead, or Feast of Apples, or All Hallows. And it's a time of sacrifice. So now that you have an idea with these 8 cycles that I named, I want to talk about how the months of the Gregorian calendar are named after different deities and where the final 4 fall. January is the first month of the year in the Gregorian calendar and has 31 days. It is named for Janus, the Roman god of doors and gateways. Think about it, doors and gateways. We make a lot of New Year's resolutions, set a bunch of goals, and we hope that can be different the previous year. February is the second month of the year in the Gregorian calendar and has 28 days. It was named from the Roman god Februus, the god of the dead and purification. March is the third month of the year in the Gregorian calendar and has 31 days. March is named for Mars, the Roman god of war. And of course, March begins with the sun in the sign of Pisces and ends in the sign of Aries. Astronomically speaking, the sun begins in the constellation of Aquarius and ends in the constellation of Pisces. In ancient Rome, March was called Martius. It was named after the war god Mars and was considered a lucky time to begin a war. In ancient Hellenistic civilizations, Mars was called Anthethestrion. In Old Japanese calendar, the month is called Yayoi. March was originally the first month of the Roman calendar. The tradition of starting the year in March continued in some countries for a long time. January 1st was only instituted as New Year's Day in France in 1564. Great Britain and her colonies continued to use March 25th until 1752. In the same year, they finally adopted to the Gregorian calendar. April is the 4th month of the year in the Gregorian calendar, and one of the 4 with a length of 30 days. April begins astrologically with the sun in the sign of Aries and ends in the sign of Taurus. Astronomically speaking, the sun begins in the constellation of Pisces and ends in the constellation of Aries. The name is derived from the Latin Aprilis, either from the Latin word aprire, which means to open, probably referring to growing plants in spring, or from the Etruscan name Apru for Aphrodite. April was originally the second month of the Roman calendar and has 29 days. Julius Caesar's calendar reform in 45 BC resulted in April having 30 days and becoming the 4th month as the year now began in January. May is the 5th month of the year in the Gregorian calendar and one of 7 Gregorian months with a length of 31 days. May begins astrologically with the sun in the sign of Taurus and ends in the sign of Gemini. Astronomically speaking, the sun begins in the constellation of Aries and ends in the constellation of Taurus. The month may have been named for the Greek goddess Maia, who was identified with the Roman goddess of fertility, Bona Dea, whose festival is held in May. In Old Japanese calendar, the month is called Satsuki. It is also a common name for females. In Japan, there is the so-called May sickness, a kind of sickness where new students or workers start to be tired of their new school or jobs. It is due to Japanese custom that all school years and fiscal years start on April 1st. June is the 6th month of the year in the Gregorian calendar and one of the 4 with the length of 30 days, with the sun sign of Gemini and ends in the sign of Cancer. Astronomically speaking, the sun begins in the constellation of Taurus and ends in the constellation of Gemini. This month is named from the Roman goddess Juno, wife of Jupiter. July is the 7th month of the year, the Gregorian calendar, and one of the 7 Gregorian months with a length of 31 days. July begins astrologically with the sun in the sign of Cancer and ends in the sign of Leo. Astronomically speaking, the sun begins in the constellation of Gemini and ends in the constellation of Cancer. July was renamed for Julius Caesar previously. It was called Quintilis in Latin, since it was the 5th month in the Roman calendar, which started in March. It is also named because it was the month that Caesar was born. Because of its origin, until the 18th century, this month's name was pronounced the same way the name Julie in Old Japanese calendar. The month is called Fumizuki. In the pagan wheel of the year, July ends at or near Lugnasad in the northern hemisphere and Imbolc in the southern hemisphere. August is the 8th month of the year in the Gregorian calendar and one of the 7 Gregorian months with a length of 31 days. August begins astrologically with the sun in the sign of Leo and ends in the sign of Virgo. Astronomically speaking, the sun begins in the constellation of Cancer and ends in the constellation of Leo. August was named in honor of Caesar Augustus. The month reputedly had 31 days because Augustus wanted as many days as Julius Caesar's July. Augustus placed the month where it is because it was when Cleopatra died. Before Augustus renamed August, it was called Sextilis in Latin. Since it was the 6th month in the Roman calendar, which started in March, in the pagan wheel of the year, August begins near Lugnasad in the northern hemisphere and in Imbolc in the southern hemisphere in Ireland. August is known as Lunasa, a modern rendition of Lugnasad, named after the god Lu, and August 1st, La Lunasa, in the Irish calendar is still regarded as the first day of autumn. September is the 9th month of the year in the Gregorian calendar, and one of the 4 Gregorian months with a length of 30 days. September begins astrologically with the sun in the sign of Virgo and ends in the sign of Libra. Astronomically speaking, the sun begins in the constellation of Leo and ends in the constellation of Virgo. The name comes from the Latin septem, for 7. September was the 7th month of the Roman calendar until 153 BCE. In Canada, Labor Day is observed on the first Monday in September. Labor Day is observed on the same day in the United States. Equinox named autumnal equinox in northern hemisphere and the vernal or spring equinox in the southern hemisphere occurs around September 21st. In the pagan wheel of the year, the spring equinox is the time of Ostara and autumn equinox for Mabon. October is the 10th month of the year in the Gregorian calendar. However, just like September, which sept means 7, September should be the 7th month, October the 8th, November the 9th, and December the 10th, but instead it's 9 through 12. And this leads me into the syncretic holidays and the commercialization of them. So Valentine's Day often is seen as a time of love. The exact origin is difficult to pinpoint. However, some can point back to the Romans and the feast of Lupercalia, celebrated between February 13th and 15th. The etymology of Lupercalia, which comes from lupus, which derives from wolf in Latin, it is suggested is connected to the ancient deity who protected herds from wolves and the legendary she-wolf who nursed Romulus and Remus, which is said to be where Rome got its origins. The festivity was viewed as a fertility rite. The festival is also associated with the god Faunus. Under the superintendence of a priest called Luperci, the festival opened with the sacrifice of a Luperci goat and dog. Luperci were led to the altar, their foreheads were touched with a bloody knife, and the blood was wiped off with wool dipped in milk. The ritual required that 2 young men laugh after this occurred, and the beasts were slain. A feast preceded it, followed after which the lubrically cut thongs from the skin of the sacrificial animals and ran in two bands around the Palatine Hill, striking with the thongs at any woman who came near them. According to Noel Lenski, a historian at the University of Colorado Boulder, the Roman romantics were drunk. They were naked. He went on to say young women would actually line up to hit them. They thought that it would make them fertile. There was also a matchmaking lottery in which young men drew the names of women from a jar. The two would then be coupled for a duration of the festival or longer, if the match was right. The name Valentine itself originates from the execution of two men by Emperor Claudius II, both named Valentine on February 14th. Their martyrdom was honored by the Catholic Church with the celebration of St. Valentine's Day. But later, Pope Gelasius I muddled things in the 5th century by combining St. Valentine's Day with Lupercalia to expel the pagan rituals, and it became a syncretic holiday. Other occult connections you could draw to the day itself is Cupid and Venus, the connection of mother and son relationship that you see throughout all of these holidays, where Cupid is Tammuz and Venus is Semiramis. The name of this month, as mentioned before, is connected to the Roman goddess, and she's also associated with passion and love, and orgiastic rites are celebrated on the 14th of February. As time went by, figures like Shakespeare romanticized Valentine's Day in his work. After the Industrial Revolution ushered in factory-made cards in the 19th century, in 1913, Hallmark Cards of Kansas City, Missouri began mass-producing Valentine's Day cards. Today, the holiday is big business. According to market research from IBIS World, Valentine's Day sales reached $17.6 billion in the year 2013. People will break the bank buying jewelry, cards, and chocolate for their loved ones, not to mention the dates that people spend money going on. The next holiday is Easter. The goddess Ostara, or Ishtar, for whom Easter is named, on March 21st is one which is the spring equinox and a sacrificial night. And Easter is the shifting date used as a common practice of astrology. It is celebrated on the first Sunday after the first new moon after Ostara. Easter is steeped in the Babylonian mysteries. According to the book America's Occult Holidays, Doc Marquise and Sam Pollard, Easter, the day of Ishtar, is celebrated widely among various cultures and religions on earth. In Babylon, Ishtar Easter, also called the moon goddess, Catholics, the Virgin Mary, Queen of Heaven, Chinese, Xingmu, Druids, Virgo, Paritura, Egypt, Isis, the pagan Ephesians, Diana, the Etruscans, Nutria, the ancient Germans, Hertha, the Greeks, Aphrodite, India, Isi or Indrani, ancient Jews, Ashtaroth, Queen of Heaven, Krishna, Devaki, Rome, Venus or Fortuna, the Scandinavians, Disa, and the Sumerians, Nana. And the Babylonians celebrated this day as a return of Ishtar, the goddess of spring. It was supposed to be her rebirth and reincarnation, and the goddess of nature. According to Babylonian legend, a huge egg fell from heaven, landing in the Euphrates River. The goddess Ishtar broke out of the egg. Later, the feature of an egg nesting was introduced, and a nest where the eggs would incubate until hatched. A wicker or reed basket was conceived in which to place the Ishtar egg. Easter egg hunt was conceived because if anyone found her egg while she was reborn, she would bestow a blessing upon the lucky person. Because this was a joyous spring festival, eggs were colored with bright spring colors. Where does the bunny tie in? Well, the goddess's totem, the moon hare, would lay eggs for good children to eat. Eostra's hare was the shape that Celts imagined on the surface of the full moon. Thus, Easter's or Ishtar was a goddess of fertility. Since the bunny is a creature that procreates quickly, it symbolized the sexual act. The egg symbolized birth and renewal. Together, the Easter bunny and Easter egg symbolize the sex act and its offspring, Semiramis and Tammuz. People brought freshly cut spring flowers and candles to place on the altar of the idol they worshipped. They would also bake hot cross buns, decorating them with crosses symbolizing the cross of Wotan or some other pagan god. Because the cross predates Christianity, contrary to the belief, when Jesus was crucified on the cross, it was a pagan symbol and it was a form of mockery. Another popular Easter offering were freshly made or purchased clothes, which people always dress up on Easter. The priests would wear their best clothes while the Vestal virgins would wear newly made white dresses. They would also wear headgear, like bonnets, while many would adorn themselves in garlands of spring flowers. They would carry a wicker basket filled with foods and candies to offer to the pagan gods and goddesses. And it's so interesting, we give our children Easter baskets filled with candy. Easter's sunrise service were originated by the priests serving the Babylonian Ishtar to symbolically hasten the reincarnation of Ishtar. And once again, we see how this has been tied to the resurrection of Christ and how people say it's resurrection celebration. Passover is actually the authentic representation of not only what happened in Exodus, but what also happened later, because Yeshua was celebrating Passover right before he was taken and he died on the cross. Lent is a commemoration of Tammuz's death. The legend of his death says that he was killed by a wild boar when he was 40 years old. Therefore, Lent celebrates one day for each year of Tammuz's life. Participants are to express their sorrow over Tammuz's ultimately untimely death by weeping, fasting, and self-chastisement. And in the Bible, in Ezekiel 8:14, then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. So even there, the Bible describes people were celebrating it back then. This pagan ritual that later was appropriated by the Catholic Church to be a Christian holiday of Jesus' resurrection. And April Fool's Day, really the strange thing about it is that it's precisely 13 weeks since New Year's Day, exactly. Then there is Halloween, which we all can see just by all the symbolism with it, but trick-or-treating itself. The pagan practice is over 2,000 years old. For the sake of their safety and well-being, people put outside their homes sweets. The best mutton legs, vegetable eggs, and poultry, honey, and even wine, so that the wandering evil spirits would consume them on their way back to the netherworld. Failure to treat these evil spirits might result in a curse being put on the home. The people believed that when these spirits came to your door, they would trick you if you did not treat them. Some other customs that people partake in for Halloween, with bonfires. People used to burn wisps from bonfires and wave them around to frighten the many evil spirits roaming the earth in case the burning wisp alone would not work. Revelers clothed themselves in the most hideous and terrifying costumes. And these people believed that if you dressed in a terrifying costume and went trooping around with the spirits all night, they would think you were one of them and would leave you alone. This is why people dress themselves up and their children for Halloween. Even with apples and apple bobbing, apples have long been a token of love and fertility. At Halloween parties, people bob for apples in tubs of water. If a boy comes up with an apple between his teeth, he was assured of the love of his girl. The snap apple game was one in which the boys delighted. Each boy in his turn would spring up to attempt to bite an apple that was being twirled on the end of a stick. The first boy to succeed would be the first to marry. Apple seeds were also used to tell fortunes. Peeling an apple in one long piece was supposed to tell a young girl about her future. The girl would swing the apple peel 3 times around her teeth, then throw it over her left shoulder. If the peeling fell unbroken, the girl would examine the shape into which it fell to see if she would ascertain the initials of her future husband. Jack-o'-lanterns are apotropaic imagery, which is believed to ward off evil spirits, similar to gargoyles on a cathedral or scary-looking door knockers. And jack-o'-lanterns have various names like lantern men, Hob-o'-Langer, and Will-o'-the-Wisp. The lantern men got their names from the pale eerie lights that appeared over bogs and marshes in England. These ghostly lights, which bobbed along like a lantern in someone's hand, were called corpse candles. Candles were said to be signals from the souls of men lost at sea. Celts often hollowed out a turnip and carved a grotesque face on it to fool demons. They carried such lanterns to light their way in the dark and to ward off evil spirits. While the turnip continues to be popular in Europe today, the pumpkin has replaced it in America. Jack is a nickname for John, which is common slang word meaning man. Jack-o'-lantern literally means man with a lantern. Trick-or-treating's connections to the Druids. It originated from the practice of hollowing out the jack-o'-lantern and filling them with human fat. Whenever a raiding party came to a home to demand of the husband that someone inside be surrendered as a human sacrifice, they would light a jack-o'-lantern filled with human fat. If the husband relented and provided one of his loved ones as a sacrifice, the Druid party would leave jack-o'-lantern on the porch. This lantern would be the tell that the other raiding parties and the demonic hosts that this party had surrendered a human for sacrifice, and that the remaining people inside were to be left alone, guaranteeing that no one else in the house would be killed that night was the treat. If the husband refused to surrender one of his loved ones, a trick would be placed upon his house. The members of the raiding party would draw a large hexagram using human blood on the front door. They got the blood from the hexagram from a dead body they dragged around with them using a cable towel. The demonic host would be attracted to the hexagram and would invade the house, causing one or more of the inhabitants to either go insane or die from fright. So these are just some of the few connections that Halloween has to its pagan roots, which Halloween is probably the most obvious of all holidays. And lastly, Christmas, which is coming up very soon. So the winter solstice is 13 weeks, and Yule on December 21st, when the sun begins its northward trek in the sky and days begin to grow longer again, pagans celebrate the winter solstice by burning the Yule log. Since the sun has reversed itself and rises in the sky, pagans believe that it was a sign that human sacrifice carried out in Samhain Halloween had been accepted by the gods, and they would continue to sing. The Roman Catholic Church later changed the name of the celebration to December 25th, calling it Christmas, which is what makes it syncretic. And syncretism simply just means changing one culture's religious customs or traditions or imagery and reappropriating it to another faith's. The Christmas tree represents the sacred tree of the winter god. Druids believed that the spirit of their gods resided in the tree. Most ancient pagans knew the tree represented Nimrod, reincarnated into Tammuz. Pagans also looked upon the tree as a phallic symbol, which is just gross. The star is five-pointed and is also called the pentalpha. It's a powerful symbol of Satan, second only to the hexagram. The star is the sacred symbol of Nimrod and has nothing whatsoever to do with Christianity. Candles represent the sun god's newly born fire, and pagans generally love candles because they're used for rituals and ceremonies, and certain colors are thought to represent specific powers. The mistletoe is the sacred plant of the Druids, symbolizing the pagan blessing of fertility. Thus, kissing under the mistletoe is the first step in the reproductive cycle. Witches also use the white berries in potions. Wreaths are circular, and so they represent the female sexual organ. Wreaths are associated with fertility and the circle of life. Santa Claus. Former Satanists have said in the past that Santa is an anagram for Satan, and the New Age god Sanat Kamura. It is most definitely an anagram for Satan. It's not just Satan, but Satan Claus. The mythical attributes and powers ascribed to Satan are eerily close to those possessed by Jesus Christ. Reindeer are horned animals representing the horn god, or the stag god of pagan religion. Santa's traditional number of reindeer in his team is 8. In Satanic gematria, 8 is the number of new beginnings, or the cycle of reincarnation. Elves are imp-like creatures who are Santa's little helpers, which, when you consider that Santa is an anagram for Satan, then we're not talking about elves, but demons. December 25th is known as the Nativity of the Sun, and the date is the birthday of Tammuz, the sun, the reincarnation of the sun god. Traditionally, December 21st is known as Yule, and the Roman Catholic Church moved the celebration of Yule to December 25th. It is predicted that the birth of Christ probably took place somewhere in the fall, from what I've studied, and does not take place in December. December 25th is also known to the Romans as Saturnalia, a time of deliberate debauchery. Drinking through repeated toasting, known as wassail, was a key to debauchery of the celebration. Fornication was symbolized by the mistletoe, and the entire event was finished with a great feast, the Christmas dinner. Even the name Christmas is pagan. Christ means Christ, while Mass means Mass, death of Christ. A deeper meaning lies in the meaning of Christ, without specifying Jesus. Thus, some celebrate Christmas as a celebration of the coming Antichrist, who will deal a death blow to Jesus Christ of Christianity, which is far removed from what most people think Christmas is about. And so, in conclusion, this is just a few of the reasons why I do not celebrate these holidays. I'm all for spending time with the family and friends and getting together, and I think it's great to give, but I just don't take place in any of the rituals like the Christmas tree, the Easter eggs, or any of that, because what's the point if I lose out on a little candy or that? To me, it's not worth it when I look at the spiritual meaning behind it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a wonderful week. Take care, and God bless you.